Let me read to you a passage from the 8th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 28 to 34. It's the Gospel for Wednesday of the 13th week of Ordinary Time. St. Matthew writes, "When Jesus arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men, coming from the tombs, met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. 'What do you want with us, Son of God?' they shouted. 'Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?' Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, 'If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs.' He said to them, 'Go.' So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed man. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region." That's from Matthew chapter 8, verse 28 to 34. We are led to think of the features of evil. What do I mean? Well, one of the most obvious features of any kind of society, be it human or not, is the presence of authority. Almost always in a pack of animals, there is some kind of leader. In many cases, the leader is wired to dominate, as we may say. We just have to think of the proverbial top dog. The top dog cannot bear seeing another dog being advantaged ahead of it, and persists in putting the other dog in the lower place. In human society, an authority of some kind is manifestly natural and needed. Very often, as with animals, the authority that emerges is that gained by force and for motives of personal dominance over others. In human society, authority ought be at the service of the entire society, but all too often it is at the service of those who hold authority or some favoured groups, while other segments are neglected or exploited. Kings and tyrants have inherited, been given, or seized authority, and have exercised power according to their lights and moral condition. Rulers have enacted laws, but generally the laws have been the result of and subject to the discretion of the rulers. That is to say, the ruler is supreme and his law is the instrument of his will. But over the past half millennium, there has been one singular and wholesome development in the Western idea of and practice of authority. It is the supremacy of law rather than the ruler. Instead of law being subject to the will of the ruler, all, including the ruler, are seen as subject to law. At times in the past, this principle has been imposed by those who are lawless, such as during the terror of the French Revolution when the monarch was executed. The lawless ones who had the power executed the monarch because he was accused of breaking the law. Still, the general principle of the supremacy of law has come into its own, at least in much of the West. What remains to be done is to ensure that the law is in accord with the moral law, for very often in the West it is not. Still, a crime is seen to be criminal, and wrongdoing is to be punished. For all the philosophical debates over the existence of free will and objective morality, society and the common sense of the ordinary man insists that some things are good and other things are bad, and you must not do what is bad. You must avoid the doing of evil. If you do not, it might mean a capital punishment for you, even if you are a king. But society also has the haziest notions of the moral and good life, and has little idea of the depth and complexity of elements involved in moral evil. Despite the practice of society in calling people to account for their decisions, many very well-educated persons still reduce decisions to the effect of the past, or to one's inner makeup, or to social and family or environment. Those who readily accept the evident fact of personal free will, and so personal responsibility, see little more as being involved in the moral evil that is so widespread in the world. The terrible catastrophe of vast wars, conflicts, and ruthless sufferings during the 20th century are seen simply as due to the immoral decisions of such as Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, and others. But it is not so simple as that. And this brings us to our gospel passage that I read earlier from Matthew chapter 8, verse 28 to 34. We have before us in our text the stunningly moral figure of Jesus Christ, the peerlessly holy one, divine holiness incarnate, the one whom the demons accused of being the Holy One of God. He is the exemplar for all time of the moral life in its perfection, and, as we know, its true source for fallen man. But what do we see confronting him? Is it just, say, a conglomerate of our moral forces? Obviously not. Is it simply the immoral decisions of men opposing the Holy One of God? No. There is more to the moral evil portrayed in our scene today than the decisions of free men. There is the demonic. When Jesus arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" There is a demonic world at work in this world of ours. Indeed, it had taken possession of the 2 unfortunate men who came from the tombs to meet our Lord. The reaction of the local pagan population to the deliverance effected by Christ also suggests a demonic darkness. This then is a very obvious lesson from our scene, a lesson for the modern secular world which knows the fact of evil and crime, but reduces it to forces, such as free will, operating in this world alone. There is another unseen world of great good and great evil, and this unseen world is operating in our own, influencing those disposed to receive its influence. Let us remember the first pages of the Holy Scriptures, which take us back to the beginnings of the world, not as a scientific and historically documented account. Rather, it is the divinely inspired account of the basic things that occurred and which are relevant for all time. God created the world and man was made in his image, endowed with great gifts of nature and grace. But he sinned, and this was the mother of all catastrophes. But what was involved in the deed? Just the decision of the man and woman? No, there was also the serpent, who insinuated itself into the heart of the woman and then the man. There is an unseen world that is of immense moral benefit to man and of immense moral danger to him. Let him beware then.